Hello and welcome back to Lunchtime Agenda. Now to discuss the issues of the day, we have Labor MP Kelvin Thompson in Melbourne and here with me in Canberra, Liberal Senator Gary Humphries. Now, Gary, first to you, this discussion of the mining tax today and the reports that there's been no profit for the government in this over the first 3 months. Now, the Coalition always touted this as a measure that was going to be the goose that lays the golden egg. Doesn't this just show that this mining tax is in fact a super profits tax and it's in line with what's going on in the industry at the moment?
Well, what it shows primarily, Laura, is that this is a government which is so spectacularly incompetent that it introduces a new tax and doesn't get any revenue from it. I mean, as Tony Abbott pointed out, the worst of both worlds. Look, I think what's happened here is that the tax has sapped confidence in the sector. On top of the carbon tax, it's made people uncertain about investing. People have pulled back from big decisions, and as a result, revenues are not what they should have been from this. In the long term, the tax will do damage to the industry. There's no doubt about that. In the short term, obviously, it's not working out the way the government has planned it to work out, which of course leads to the fact that the government's budget surplus is now in question. So whichever way you look, this is bad management of the economy, bad management of a new tax, indications of a government that just can't get it right no matter what they try, no matter which way they turn.
But Wayne Swan does say that 1 quarter isn't reflective of an entire year. This still has 9 months to run. That's fair enough, isn't it?
They expected to raise $3.7 billion when the budget was handed down in May this year from this new tax. They told us when we said this is not going to work, they said yes, it will raise $3.7 billion. Now, only a quarter into the financial year, they're saying actually no, it won't raise that, it'll only raise $2 billion. I mean, how many more times do they have to revise their figures and tell us, oh, this is all part of the plan? We knew this was going to happen, we factored this in before we realised that they're making it up as they go along. That this is a day-by-day proposition to try and patch up what is an incredibly ramshackle government budgeting process. It's just not working.
Kelvin Thompson, the surplus is perhaps in danger here if the government doesn't raise $2 billion over the next 9 months from the MRRT. How's the government going to pay for the school kids' bonus?
Well, Laura, let's observe first that we're operating here on the basis of unsubstantiated and unconfirmed reports. But secondly, let's look at what lies behind this. There is concern that if the revenue doesn't come in, that the government won't be able to balance the books and that would put upward pressure on interest rates. The fact is that interest rates have come down by 150 basis points over the course of the past 12 months, that an average family with a $300,000 mortgage is now paying $4,500 a year less than they were when the Liberal Party was in office, and that indeed both inflation and official interest rates are less than half what they were when the Howard government left office. So I think our fiscal management strategy, our fiscal discipline is indeed working, and I've got every confidence that it will continue to work.
Kelvin Thompson, though, if it hasn't, this MRRT hasn't or has failed to reap any revenue for the government in its first quarter because commodity prices are down, isn't it time to revisit perhaps looking at broadening the base of this tax or looking at the level at which the super profits tax does kick in at?
Well, there's no basis to do that, Laura. The government announced its mid-year review of the numbers at the start of this week and put in place steps designed to ensure that we continue to balance the books and continue to have a surplus.
Would you like to see the threshold kick in earlier? Would you like to see the threshold kick in earlier, or things included like uranium and copper?
Well, I don't think there's any requirement or any basis to revisit the tax which was put in place after extensive negotiations and an extensive parliamentary process. What we did at the start of the week was to introduce measures and take steps designed to protect the budget surplus and to protect that strong financial position that Australia is in today, and indeed we are the envy of the rest of the world given our performance in relation to inflation, interest rates and employment.
I just want to get to this company tax as well. This working group has failed to come up with finding a revenue neutral way of getting a company tax rate cut to 29%. Isn't it right, Gary Humphries, that under the coalition, any cut to the company tax rate would have to be revenue neutral as well, because your paid parental leave scheme would be paid for by revenue from the mining tax?
Well, obviously you've got to pay for any tax break that you give anybody, and that has to be found from somewhere. We've made it clear we think there are other things that the government could be doing which is not really examining properly at the moment, such as trimming the cost of government, cutting back on government ads and the other things the government's wasting money on.
But if the industry can't even come up with a revenue neutral way within discussions by themselves after a year, there's no hope of the opposition getting them to do that either.
Well, it wasn't the industry which promised a tax cut. It was the Labor Party back in 2010 which faithfully promised that there'd be a tax cut for companies, and it said we'll deliver this tax cut, and then it made very cursory attempts to negotiate that through the Parliament, failed, and says all too hard, you business, you go and work it out how you'll pay for our promise. It was always highly implausible that a business group would be able to come up with ways of paying for the Labor government's own unfunded promise, and now they're saying, well, we can't do it. Not surprisingly, they can't do it. You've got to make real savings to get those sorts of things to happen. Tax cuts are good.
Kelvin Thompson, this is just an aspiration now, isn't it?
Well, Laura, it's a bit rich for Senator Humphries to be complaining that Labor failed to get through a company tax cut when it was his party and the Greens which blocked our endeavours to reduce company taxes. We had a plan to do that. That was not supported by the opposition. In fact, what the opposition has is a plan to increase company taxes, a 1.5% levy on companies which earn a taxable income higher than $5 million in order to fund their paid parental leave scheme. So there's one side of politics proposing that company taxes be increased, and that's the Liberal opposition.
We're the party that's always delivered tax cuts. We did so consistently throughout the Howard years. We'll do it again. The reason that particular company tax arrangement was rejected by us is because it was funded by the mining tax. And we've always said you can't put someone else's taxes up in order to pay for somebody else's tax cuts.
You still do need to pay for the paid parental leave scheme, don't you?
Absolutely, and that component we've made clear is an impost on the 3,000 largest businesses in the country. We believe that's sustainable in an environment where we are lowering taxes across the board. We're going to have a general tax cut for business. We've already said that. We'll stick to that. And other taxes like the carbon tax will come down under a coalition government.
OK, Kelvin Thompson, earlier this week you called for a complete scrapping of the baby bonus. Is anyone else in your party backing you on this?
Well, Laura, I mean, I don't report personal and private conversations, but it's an issue that I've been raising for a number of years, and I think that the government has headed in the right direction by taking it from being a lump sum towards periodic and regular payments, by introducing some means testing, and now by reducing it from $5,000 to $3,000 for second and subsequent children. So I do think that there are steps that are being taken in the right direction, but my own view is that we would be better off redirecting money from the baby bonus towards higher education, towards reducing tertiary education and vocational education fees. I think that would be helpful for both families and for the nation, where I think there needs to be a focus on educating and training young people.
And Gary Humphries, just quickly, this was something that was introduced by the Howard government. Some people have called it a vote-buying exercise. Do you think it should be lowered or even scrapped?
No, I don't. I think it's very important to recognise that Australia has a stagnating birth rate. We do need to grow our population, and giving people the support they need in those very critical early months of a child being born is very important to giving people the reason to continue to persist with child rearing when other things might draw them away from that. We've always said it was a good thing. If the government was cutting the baby bonus now for philosophical reasons, which at least Kelvin Thompson has, I'd be supportive at least of looking at it. They're cutting it because their budget is turning to poo. They've got no alternative but to find money anywhere they can grab it. Health, education, baby bonus, research, anything they can get their hands on, they're doing. They're grabbing the money. That's the reason the baby bonus has been cut, not because they think it's a bad idea.
Just quickly on the ACT election, it looks like that Katie Gallagher will be the Chief Minister once again. There has been a big swing for the Liberals, but not quite big enough.
Well, look, I think on Saturday people in the ACT voted for a change, and they delivered a scathing verdict on the Greens, who are the Labor Party's allies in government. It looks as if Labor itself won't be hurt by that swing against the government's allies, but I think people here want a change, and it would be, I think, very unfortunate if after this process the big winner out of the election is the Greens themselves, who could well, with only one seat in the parliament, go into being a minister in this new government.
Kelvin Thompson, just quickly, not a great indictment on the Greens at this ACT election. Not particularly great for the Labor Party either, though.
Well, I think it was pretty meritorious that the Labor Party increased its primary vote after being in office for 11 years. As Gary's pointed out, the big losers in terms of the votes were the Greens. They had a significant fall in their level of support, and indeed the Liberals had an increase in their level of support. But under the system that ACT elections are counted by, we won't know the final results for some time, so it's a bit premature to speculate too much on it. I think our overall result was quite meritorious.
Yes, we will keep an eye on those results. We still don't know a result more than a week after the election. But thank you so much for joining us on our panel. Kelvin Thompson there in Melbourne and Gary Humphries here in Canberra. And that is